Hey, I'm back. So this is the first stream that I've done in a while when it comes to Twitch. Just wanted to get rid of the rust here on on streaming. So the topic of this episode is going to be actually screencasting again. So you'll remember probably the first episode or two that I did on this particular channel was screencasting with ScreenFlow, because back then I was using the Mac that's sitting next to me. But I've since gotten a Windows computer, and ScreenFlow isn't available on Windows. So we're going to be actually looking at Camtasia when it comes to editing screencasts. So these are the videos that I throw up on YouTube. They're a little different from, say, these Twitch videos, because I actually edit them, I zoom in, I add some visual effects, things like that. Using a tool like this, it's a little easier to use than, say, iMovie or whatever the Windows equivalent is of iMovie, where you don't get kind of the special effects that are designed for screencasting. So I just want to put out there that I am live. So let me type it in the chat. If you do want to engage, I am looking at the messages. I have them on my other monitor. This is going to be not so much of a technical episode, but it's still valuable information to know. So not ScreenFlow, Camtasia. I'm sorry, I'm getting into the Camtasia mentality here. It's not free. ScreenFlow wasn't free either. It's actually quite pricey, but in my opinion, it's worth it. Invest in yourself and what you're doing. It's going to make your life a lot easier. So let's go ahead, and first we're going to start by maybe recording something, and then I'm going to go ahead and we're going to edit a video that I've already recorded. So that way you get that kind of the full experience on what I go through when I edit a video for YouTube. So let's go ahead and first I have Camtasia inside of my Windows taskbar. What you see when this pops up is you see something like this. I'm sorry, I'm getting messages on my watch about Twitch. You see something that looks like this. You get information like you can choose, do you want to cast your screen? Do you want to cast your camera? I can't do my camera because I'm currently using it for OBS. But my microphone, I can use my microphone. I can set volume levels, things like that. So I'm going to move it to my other screen, and we're just going to record something real quick. So I hit the record button. You'll notice that there is a countdown timer happening. So it is recording right now. I can see to my other screen. I'll just drag it over real quick. It looks something like this. So if I scroll around, maybe, I don't know, we'll just scroll around. I'll zoom in a bit, kind of like we want to get the effect. So I'll reduce the view. What I'll do is I'll open up my, let's see if I can open up my inspector here, so that way I can show a scrolling effect when the time comes, things like that. So let's go ahead and stop it. I'm going to hit F10 on my keyboard. It's going to ask me to save it if I don't have it set up automatically. I'm just going to hit save, and then it'll open up the Camtasia editing experience. All right, so this is what you'd get when you work with Camtasia. So after you record a screencast, and I'm just making this larger, I'm not changing the volume or anything. But if I wanted to, I can hit that play button, and you should hear stuff out of my speakers. So it is recording right now. I can see to my other screen. I just paused it. Something that you might be noticing is that the audio is only coming out from one side of the speaker. That's because of my microphone. An easy fix for this, if you suffer from the same problems I'm suffering from, is if you click on the track, which it's currently clicked on, and click on audio, you can set the mix to mono. And that's going to change it so that way it plays out of both left and right speakers. I don't know why my Scarlett Solo and AT2020 microphone does that. Not a big deal. I can fix it with this checkbox. I don't notice any kind of change in quality. And life is good. So I'll go ahead and hit play again. I'll go back to the beginning. So it is recording right now. I can see to my other screen. I'll just drag it over real quick. It looks something like this. So you'll notice not too bad. You'll also notice that when I'm selecting this track, what you want to try to do is you want to keep your volume, so these audio waveforms, you want to make sure that they don't really go too high, because you don't want them to be a hot point. You don't want them to start clipping, because if the input volume on your microphone or the gain is set too high on your microphone and it starts clipping, if it starts going too high, you're going to get a lot of audio distortion. So my general rule of thumb, and this could differ between everyone, is you want to keep most of your waveforms below this green line. You can have some of them higher. I don't think they're clipping if they pass this line. It's just kind of a warning that you've got quite a variation in volume. Now, if I were to kind of move this green line up and down, I can actually change the volume for this particular track. So I can actually increase it like that, or I can decrease it down way low. It's totally up to you. I'm going to hit undo though, so that way it doesn't do anything. Just want to take a moment again to put in the chat that I'm using Camtasia, not ScreenFlow this time. So that way, if you're coming in from the chat and you're confused on what we are doing, I've just wanted to throw it out there that we're learning how to edit videos for YouTube using Camtasia. And Camtasia is available for Windows and Mac. I don't know if it's available for Linux, whereas ScreenFlow, which is what I was using prior to my Mac, was only available for Mac. So different kind of experience. I actually personally like Camtasia a little better. At first I hated it, but that's because it was user error. I didn't know what I was doing. Now I actually find it easier to use for making the YouTube screencasts than I had as far as ScreenFlow went. But everyone's experience will vary. All right, so let's take a look. So we learned about our volume, and we could always change that as well. Another thing that I like to do is change the zoom and the pan area. So if I go to the left here and I click on maybe, let's go ahead and click on animations. And I realize it's going to be very small. I'm not quite sure I can zoom in with Camtasia the way that I can a web browser during a live stream. So just bear with me. I clicked on animations. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on animation. And I have these other options. Now, at first I was playing around with these options. They are nice. Some of them do really cool stuff. You can hover over them to see what it actually does. I find myself more often than not using custom. And no, it's not going to create a swirl effect like that. It's just that you can do anything with it, basically. So for example, if I drag this into my timeline, what I can do is I can click on the red dot, and basically what's happening is it's going to animate during this period of time up until whatever I set it to as far as a final end run. So for example, let's say that I want it to zoom in. It's at 50% right now. Let's go ahead and zoom into 100%. I'm on a 4K screen, so it's trying to fit this canvas. This canvas right here is 1080p. I can change the canvas size if I want, but I find that it works a little better if I just leave it as 1080p, which is what I expect to use for YouTube, and I just play around with the zooms and the pans manually. So if I hit enter, it's now at 100%. So it's going to be much larger because my screen is much larger and this canvas is a lot smaller. I can pick what I want to focus on. I'm just going to focus on this area over here. And if I go back, I just click back on my timeline here and hit enter real quick. It looks something like this. So you can see that not only did it zoom in, but it also moved the screen over to that kind of focus point. So really slick animation. So let's say if I wanted to do it over here, I can add another custom if I want. This time instead of 100, maybe I set it to 50 again. I can change it so that way it's back centered in the canvas. And I don't know, we'll just scroll around. I'll zoom in a bit, kind of like we want to see how it went. Now it was a little stuttery because I think I was scrolling around at the same time. So your experience might vary a little bit. All right, so let me close this out. We're gonna go through a real video. It's about 13 minutes long. I recorded it earlier. Let's go ahead and exit out. No, I don't want to save it. No, I don't want to keep my browser open. I'm gonna click on this project that I had set up. It's a Camtasia project. All right, so like I said, about 13 minutes long, kind of exactly. I'm gonna bring this up so that way it's a little easier to look at. I'm also gonna zoom in a bit so that way it's not all cramped together. Gives me an idea of what I'm working with. So let's go ahead and what I'm gonna do is just start editing. So first of all, let's go ahead and hit play. In this tutorial, we're gonna be taking a look at static web. So again, you'll notice that because of my microphone, it's getting the one-sided speaker deal again. So I'm gonna click on it. I'm gonna click on the volume icon up towards the top, and I'm gonna say mix to mono. Website generation. So typically, and you'll notice it's a lot better now. So if you're actually in the chat right now, I don't know if anyone's in the chat. It's all right if there's nobody there. Please let me know if you can't hear what's coming out of my speaker, or if you can't hear what's coming out of my microphone. I do want the experience to be good. So I'll add it to the chat too. Please know if any problems with my audio or video. All right, so I added it. Also, please engage with me in the chat. Let me know that you're there. Don't be a stranger. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna edit now. So let's it's gonna be a lot of me maybe not talking through this microphone, but just editing this video. I'll tell you what I'm doing as I do it, but it's gonna be maybe some wait and see. In this tutorial, we're gonna be taking a look at static website generation. So typically when it comes to static site generation, what's happening is you are creating some kind of website in say Markdown or ASCII doc or some other format, and you are transpiling or compiling it into just static HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Now this is an alternative to using sites or services like WordPress, Drupal, or similar. Now when it comes to static site generation, you're not using a database. You are compiling strictly to, like I said, JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So you get huge performance value, and it's actually very cheap to host in the end. So you'll notice that I do have a bit of silence here, or semi-silence, and I'll actually scroll over so that way my face doesn't cut it off inside of the Twitch stream. So I have this little bit of silence. I could leave it if I want, or I can select the track and it'll cut. If I hit the S key, it'll cut at the playhead right here. So I can move the playhead over and I can click it and I can cut it again. Now, if I want to delete this little chunk, I can delete it. I'm going to leave this gap and I can move this over. Or I just hit the undo key. Or I can click this little magnet symbol. And now when I delete it, it does a ripple kind of delete. So it shifts everything to the left. So it's a really cool feature. It saves some time. So let's go ahead and check it out. Cheap to host in the end. So when it comes to static site generators, Hugo is my personal preference. There are other popular generators, say for example, Jekyll or 11D, maybe even ViewPress. There's quite a few. Hugo is actually written in Go. It's very fast. To me, it's very easy to use. Knowing that it's written in Go doesn't mean anything. You don't have to know Go to know how to use Hugo. So right here, I probably could have done this earlier on. Let's go ahead and zoom in on the Hugo side a little bit. So let's go ahead and click on animations. I'm going to click on the animation tab here again. And I'm going to say custom. I'm just going to drag it over. I'm going to make sure that the correct area is selected. And I'm going to say, let's make this 75%. So that way it takes up a little bit more space here. I'll center it. That's probably fine. And you'll see that this is what it looks like. You don't have to know Go to know how to use Hugo, but we're going to see how to actually use it and get started. So this is more of an introduction tutorial. So if you are already a Hugo user and are looking for something more advanced, you might want to take a look at some of my other content. This, we're just going to get up and running and see how easy it is to get started when it comes to Hugo. So I am on the Hugo website. If this is your first time using Hugo, you will need to install it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here. So I am on the Hugo website. All right, so I talk about the Hugo website. Now would be probably a good opportunity to add some text. So let's go ahead and go on annotations. I click all, and I'm going to drag the one that I like onto the screen. So I'm going to drag it right here. See if I can get it the way I want. I could always move it over. I'm going to use the arrow keys to move it around now to get it kind of exactly how I want it. And I'm going to get the URL. I believe the URL is actually Go Hugo. Yep, I got it. I'm going to go back into Camtasia, and I'm going to paste it in. And it doesn't look good, but let's go ahead and drag it out. I don't particularly want it centered like that, so I'm going to change the alignment to left. Maybe I don't need it to take up all of that space. I also probably don't need that slash. Might not even actually need the HTTPS, so let's maybe make it look like that. So if I wanted to, I could play it. Hugo. So I am on the Hugo website. You saw that it popped in rather sharply. I don't really like that. So what I can do is I can add a transition. The transition I want to choose is maybe fade. I'm going to drag that right on top of the text element, and I'm going to try it again. So I am on the Hugo website. If this is your, you'll notice how it faded in real smooth. So it's totally up to you. It's more personal preference than anything, and you have other transition options. These are transitions, not animations. The animations, remember, were for moving around, whereas these are just fade-ins and kind of things like that. So let's go ahead and continue. First time using Hugo, you will need to install it. You can download the binaries for your operating system, or you can use a package manager. So for example, on Windows, you can actually use Chocolatey. So Chocolatey, what you would want to do is you would want to, so this is another scenario where I might want to add some text. So I'm going to say Chocolatey. I'll actually say Hugo for the query. It'll do it for me inside of this box. But let's go ahead and copy that in. I'm just going to copy the URL. I'm going to add some more text here. Chocolatey. You can actually use chocolate. All right, so let's go ahead and add an annotation. I'm going to drag it over. Maybe move it around to wherever I like it, and I'm going to paste it in. And again, it probably provided a little more than I needed here. Probably don't want the HTTPS in there. Let's go ahead and left align it, and I'm going to drop it down just a bit. And then finally, let's go ahead and add some transitions. And let's check it out. On Windows, you can actually use Chocolatey. So Chocolatey, what you would want to do is you would want to install the standard Hugo package. Now, if you want to use some of the advanced features, and this actually got me the first time when I tried to use it on Hugo, like I wanted to compile Sass, so some CSS. It's not available out of the box with the standard Hugo. Instead, what you have to do is you have to install Hugo Extended if you want those extended features. Not a big deal, but it wasn't obvious to me the first time. If you're on a Mac, you can go ahead and install Hugo with Homebrew. Let's go ahead and get that Homebrew URL. I don't know what it is, so let's go ahead and I think it's this one. Perfect. So I am going to copy it. That looks like it's probably the right one. As far as I know, yes. Linux formula, I'm not quite sure Linux, but this is typical stuff. It's just it's brew install Hugo, so I think this is the right one. Let's go ahead and paste it in. Go ahead and get our annotations. See where I actually talk about it though. If you're on a Mac, you can go. All right, so about right here. I'm going to move this around to where it makes sense. I'm going to paste in the URL. And let's go ahead and figure it out. I'm going to left align it, and I am going to shrink it down a bit. That looks good. Go ahead and add some transition. I'm going to add a fade. You could always change how long that fade happens for. Check it out. You can go ahead and install Hugo with Homebrew. That's the recommended approach. You don't need to get any kind of extended package for Homebrew. Just go ahead and use brew install. Now, once it's installed, then you can actually start building a project. So for example, if I open up my terminal, right now what's happening is I'm on my desktop. I would want to create a new site. So I would say something like Hugo, new site, and then maybe I want to call it Raboy or Raboy's site. It doesn't really matter. So it created that directory. So if I navigate into it, it'll look something like this. So I just did a list of file contents of this directory, and I have a few directories as well as a configuration file. And this configuration file right now, it's in TOML format. You could also use YAML files or JSON. So when it comes to my personal sites, I use JSON. I'm not a huge fan of TOML, but it's totally up to you. TOML is the default. So what we can do is we can open up this project. I'm going to open it up in Visual Studio Code. So it opened. I'm in the wrong kind of screen real estate area. So let's go ahead and change that. Let's go ahead and add some animations. Drag over custom. And I can always shrink this to make it a faster animation. But let's go ahead and click on the little dot. What I'm going to do is actually, instead of zooming, I may actually just pan it. So I like to get it right up there, a little higher. That should be good. Let's go ahead and check it out. But we can open it up and we can start exploring. Perfect. Actually, what I want to do is I want to move it just a little higher up. And you'll notice that it applied that for anything after the red dot. So check it out. But we can open it up and we can start exploring. So let's go ahead and click on that config.toml file. This is what you would get out of the box when it comes to TOML. So you would actually want to zoom in a little further. I want to make it 100%. You're going to get the clearest resolution out of 100%. So that's what I want to do. So I'm going to add a custom here. I'm going to make it 100. And let's go ahead and check it out. All right, I got it where I want. Check it. Box when it comes to TOML. So you would have a base URL. So this is the URL that you are planning to publish to. We're going to see that we can serve it locally as well. We want the language code and a site title. Now there's a lot of other configuration that you can apply when it comes to this config.toml file. Inside of the content directory, this is where all of your content's going to reside. So if you say Hugo and then you want to create a new particular blog post or static site page, it's going to end up inside of that content directory. The data directory is more for static data content. So for example, maybe you have some data that might otherwise exist in a database, but that data doesn't really change. It can exist as a JSON file. You would actually add it to this data directory and you can access it similar to like you would a database. The layouts, if you want to create your own custom layout, static is going to be for static images or CSS or JavaScript that doesn't really change based on the build process. And then the themes is the theme that you download. So let's go ahead and move on through this kind of quick start or introduction tutorial. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the terminal within Visual Studio Code so that way we don't have to jump around as much. But what we're going to want, so I've opened up the terminal. You can't see it on the screen. So what we have to do is we have to add an animation to pan over to that area of the screen. Because remember, my monitor is a 4K monitor. This canvas right here is 1080p. I could do everything at 50% and then my entire screen would fit, but everything would be very small and the user would not be able to see it. And I've received plenty of comments on YouTube about things being too small. So if you want to have a good video, don't zoom out on things. Either zoom in or move around. That's my feedback to you if you're getting started. So I added this spot. So I'm going to scroll down here to figure out what exactly I want to include. I don't need to include the blue area, distracting. And let's check it out. We don't have to jump around as much, but what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to pick a theme. because right now if I were to try to run or build this, it's not going to go so well. So if I go back into my web browser, I think this is me fumbling with my browser. That's not. So what I can do here is, let's zoom out. Make it 50%. It's fine, I think, in this scenario. I'm going to click it. I'm going to say 50%. And I'm going to move it back into the center. So this is my full screen. It's 50%. It's small, but we're not looking at anything particular on the screen. And I say themes. I can choose one of the many themes that are available. I can also choose. So let me go ahead and add some text here. So it's going to be an annotation. I'm going to move it over here. Use my arrow keys to kind of place it where I want. This one is going to be themes.gohugo.io. I'm going to stretch it out. I'm going to left align it. I'm going to shrink it down. I'm going to add some transitions. I'm also debating on whether or not I want to remove some of this. So I think I do. So let me just scroll over just a little bit. And I say themes. Yeah, so I'm going to click on it. I'm going to hit the S key to slice it. And I'm going to slice over here again. And I am actually going to click delete. Now you'll notice I only have a magnet on this particular track. My callout didn't do anything. So I'm going to have to move that one manually, because if you have a magnet there, it's going to magnet all of this space. And I accidentally moved it to the wrong place. So let's go ahead and check it out. And I say themes. I can choose one of the many themes that are available. I can also choose to build my own theme. And that's something that's kind of out of the scope of this particular tutorial. But let's go ahead and pick a theme. I'm just going to pick the first one that shows up. This is the terminal theme. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to hopefully the installation instructions. So you'll notice that my browser is pretty small. I can't imagine anyone being able to read this even in this full screen. I know that we're on Twitch right now, so this is going to be incredibly difficult to read. So let's go ahead and zoom in. That's what it's there for. So animations, custom. Let's go ahead and maybe zoom into, maybe let's start with 75% and see where that takes us. So see what we got here. I think that's probably fine. Doesn't have to be perfect. Instructions. Perfect. So I have the installation instructions. Let me look at that one more time. Scroll down to hopefully the installation instructions. Perfect. So I have the installation instructions. So if I want to, I can just copy this command. I can go back to my Visual Studio Code. Let's go ahead and center on our terminal again, because I'm going to paste it into the terminal. So let's go ahead and make it look nice. Looks good. My Visual Studio Code. And I can paste it in. So what it's doing a Git Clone, and it's going to add this terminal theme into my themes directory. So I'm going to hit enter. So you'll notice that I go ahead and move it up. Let's check it out. So you'll notice that I now have a terminal theme inside of my themes directory. So now what we want to do is we want to add that theme to the configuration file, so that way it uses that theme, because I could in theory have numerous themes in my project and I can switch between them as I please. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say theme, and I'm going to say equals terminal, and I'm going to save it. Now if I wanted to, I can clear this. So what let's go and go back into the terminal, because that's kind of what I'm referencing. I'm going to scroll down. And let's check it out. Now, if I wanted to, I can clear this. So what I can do is I can say Hugo. And just by saying Hugo, what that's going to do is that's going to build my site. So there's a long pause of silence here while I look at this error message. Let's go ahead and maybe clip it all out. My site. So I'm going to clip it right there. So I hit S. I'm also going to clip it right here. I'm going to delete. The magnet is on, so it automatically moved it for me. I'm going to build my site. And as you can see, there were errors, and these errors were because the theme has certain dependencies that I did not meet. So let's go ahead and check out that theme. It's small. I realize it's small. Let's so the theme inside of the configuration, I didn't follow the next step in the configuration, is it wants me to add this information. Now all themes are going to be different. They're all going to have different requirements in terms of what you need to add to your configuration file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the easy route, and I'm actually just going to copy everything outside of the language code and the base URL just to satisfy the theme. And we could always review it later and figure out what we can remove and what we can add. But let's go ahead and add it in. All right, so I'm back in my Visual Studio Code here. I'm going to move around. So I've added another animation. There we go. So I'm going to paste it in. And I'm going to try that Hugo command once more. Go back into the terminal. This is probably one of the negatives of having a large screen, is that if you don't want to have to zoom out, you're going to have to move around quite a bit. So let's actually move it over here, get a little bit more of our screen into the scene, and let's try it. And I'm going to try that Hugo command once more. You'll notice that this time around, it didn't throw any kind of errors. It built 14 static files, and if I wanted to explore them through the built-in Hugo server, I can say Hugo server or serve. And what that's going to do is it's going to serve it at localhost on port 1313. Go ahead and change the view. All right. 313. And you'll notice that this is what happens in my browser when I choose to navigate to localhost 1313. And there's really nothing here because I don't have any pages, I don't have any content, I just have that base theme. So let's go ahead and work towards actually adding some content. So if I go back into Visual Studio Code and I stop serving, what I can do is I can go ahead and change the scene, the view. Maybe let's zoom in a bit too. I always like to try to stay at 100% if I can. I'm going to go back into the terminal. And let's check it out. What I can do is I can say Hugo new, and I'm going to say posts. And I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to say my first post. And this is going to be a markdown file. And I'm going to hit enter. Let's go ahead and move it around. And I'm going to hit enter. You'll notice that inside of my content directory, it created a posts directory, and it created a markdown file called myfirstpost.md. And inside of that file, it's including some certain front matter information. And I have the option to fill in more information as well. Let's give it a title. I'm going to say my first post. I'm not going to include anything else. Let's just see if it works out. But I am going to clear it, and I'm just going to say Hugo serve again. It looks like it worked. So let's go ahead and go back. I missed it. It's out, but I am going to clear it. Let's. I'm talking about my terminal. Go down. So let's just see if it works out. But I am going to clear it, and I'm just going to say Hugo serve again. It looks like it worked. So let's go ahead and go back into the browser and see if now we have one item. Go ahead and add animation here. see if now we have one item. You'll see when I refreshed that I now have my first post. Of course, there's going to be no content in there because I didn't actually add anything. So if I open up Visual Studio Code and I say hello world and save it and go back into my browser, it's already there. It's already refreshed because I'm still serving the Hugo application and it says hello world. Likewise, if I went back and refreshed, well, this particular theme, it looks like it's not showing any kind of preview content, which is fine. It's on a per theme basis. Every theme behaves differently. I have a piece of silence here, so let's, yeah, it doesn't look like anything happened. So let's go ahead and delete it. So I'm just splitting the track here and I'm deleting. And let's play again. Theme behaves differently. So let's say that we want to go into our Visual Studio Code editor or whatever you're using. Different themes are going to have different front matter. So for example, this particular theme has all of this, which is fine. You can actually see what the front matter is going to add by going into your themes. And we can look at archetypes and we can look at post.md. So you'll notice that it just copied what was inside of this post.md file into any new file. Go ahead and just zoom up just a little bit so that way you can see where my mouse clicks are slightly. It doesn't really affect, I don't have to go back because it doesn't affect too much the overall video. Any new file that has the post directory. So you'll notice that we created this my first post file inside of the post directory and that's why it picked up this archetype information. Other themes are going to have different archetypes. So for example, maybe there's a draft keyword here. Draft usually means that Hugo shouldn't be publishing it. Or maybe there's a future publish date that's in the future from now. Hugo's probably not going to publish that unless you specifically tell it to publish drafts or publish future items. So typically what you would do is you would say Hugo. You can say, oh, so it looks like I'm typing again down there. Let's check it out. Publish future items. Let's go to move down. Drafts or publish future items. So typically what you would do is you would say Hugo. You can say serve or build, or not build. You can say serve if you want, but I'm just going to say build drafts, and I'm going to say build future. Now we don't have any future items and we don't have any drafts, but in the event that your theme does have that, you can go ahead and choose to do that. So that's kind of Hugo in a nutshell. Let's go ahead and remove this silence. Not necessary. And choose to do that. So that's kind of Hugo in a nutshell. Hugo is very powerful. It's very easy to use. The directory structure doesn't matter a whole lot. So for example, if I wanted to say Hugo new post being in that post directory, if I wanted to give it kind of a URL format, so I can say 2020 and I can say 06 and then I can say my second post.md. What it's going to do, let's go ahead and add an animation there so that way I can do a pan motion where I want to put it. All right, post.md. What it's going to do is it's going to create that directory for me and it's going to create this file. And I can say something else and we're going to see if it actually shows up. Go ahead and zoom down again. This is basically what most of my videos consist of. It's just me moving around a lot. I mean, everyone's going to have a different experience based on what they record, but for a screencast for developer material, a lot of moving around shows up. Oops, we're going to do Hugo serve actually. I'm going to go back into my browser. Go ahead and move around again. I'm going to go back into my browser. I am going to go back and I'm going to refresh. You'll notice I forgot to add a title here, but it actually does have content. So even though the directory structure changed, I actually have two different pieces of content here. So this is very powerful stuff. So if you want more ideas on what you, so let me zoom out because I think I'm done with the overall material, so nothing that needs to be focused on. So I'm going to zoom out to 50%, so my whole screen is within view. Check it out. This is very powerful stuff. So if you want more ideas on what you can accomplish with Hugo, take for example the Polyglot Developer. So the Polyglot Developer in its entirety is built off of Hugo. So for example, each page inside of this menu is a Hugo page. The blog is a lot of post content, kind of like what we saw. And this is actually built on a scheduler. So there are automations behind it. So basically, I create a future publish date. It will queue up inside of my build system, and it'll build and publish on the dates that I choose. And this is a substitute. This is a step away from actually using a CMS like WordPress, which uses a database, which uses a back-end web technology, which can be expensive as you begin to scale. And not only expensive, but it can also slow down significantly based on the demand. Whereas this is a static website, it goes pretty much as fast as the user's web browser can handle because there isn't a whole lot of crunching going on. So I definitely recommend checking out Hugo. It is a great utility. All right, so it looks like that video is done. What I'm going to do, and I've been messing around with the chat. I don't know why it's cutting off my chat messages. But let's go ahead and choose share. We're going to export it. And I'm going to export a local file. And I'm just going to choose the defaults that it has for me. And it's just going to export to an MP4 for me. And while that's happening, let me look at my chat box here, see if I can figure out what's going on. It looks like it might have fixed it. So let me try the URL one more time here. It looks like it's there. It's not ideal when it comes to what it looks like. I definitely want to try to figure out a way to make a better looking chat widget here. That's a project for another day. Just to reiterate on what happened here while this exports, and it's exporting kind of slow because I have OBS happening at the same time. So Twitch, generally it's pretty fast. But I just demonstrated how to record and then edit a screencast with Camtasia. So Camtasia is a new software I've been using when it comes to my YouTube videos, even my courses. So I used to be using ScreenFlow for Mac because I used to use this Mac next to me as my primary computer, but now I'm using Windows. And unfortunately, Windows doesn't have ScreenFlow. That's all right, because I actually think I like Camtasia better than ScreenFlow now, and I've been using ScreenFlow for years. Good news is Camtasia works for Mac too, so it's cross-platform. Now, what we did was we just edited a full video, so this is an actual video that I'll probably throw up on YouTube at some point. So I just wanted to walk through the steps that I actually use when it comes to video editing. It's not by any means a fast process. Even if I wasn't doing Twitch at the same time, it'd still take me at least 13 minutes to edit that video. So the video started at 13 minutes, and it had roughly maybe 13, maybe 20, between 13 and 20 minutes of editing. And that's what goes into every video or every course that I do, because you want your users to be able to see the text that's happening. You want them to be able to see the certain parts of the screen that's very important, rather than me just leaving it at 50% and having everything be super tiny. Because nobody benefits from a super tiny screen. If you wanted to see some of the courses that I recorded, I don't know if I have them saved here as a shortcut. Looks like I do. So I do have some courses. I'll use this as a moment to plug my courses since it's currently exporting. So I'll zoom in a bit. So I actually released a new course here, live streaming on Twitch for beginners. So this, I got a lot of good feedback from the OBS and Twitch related content that I put out. A lot of people are starting to learn how to do Twitch stuff right now. So if you're interested in learning how to stream to Twitch, check out the course. You'll find benefit in it, and it maintains the same quality that you saw when it came to the video that we just edited together. So again, this video will end up on YouTube. both the Twitch version as well as the video that we edited. If you wanted to maybe learn more about the blog, you can say visit this URL here. That's the actually, I don't think it's blog, I think it's website. That's the website. You can visit that, as well as in case you're viewing this on demand on YouTube and you didn't make it to Twitch, this is where you can actually find the Twitch stream for future live broadcasts. And I believe that it's almost done exporting here. Check it out. All right, looks like it's done. I'll save it, I'll close it. So it spit it out to my desktop here. So I'll double click it. In this tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at static website generator. Also choose to build my own theme, and inside of that file, it looks pretty good in my opinion. Some certain front matter. So I think we did a good job. So again, if you like this content, follow the channel. It's much appreciated. If you have feedback regarding the stream, I'd love to hear that as well. Otherwise, I hope you tune in for the next stream.